Eagles Entertainment.
The journey to the draft is driven by AAA. AAA, roadside is their strong side. Make AAA a part of your game day today. AAA, go ahead.
With the 21st pick in the NFL Draft, the Philadelphia Eagles select...
You're listening to the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA.
Welcome to the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA. I'm your host, Fran Duffy. We've got a fun episode here today, here on the Journey to the Draft podcast. We've got a former NFL general manager in Mike Tannenbaum joining us to talk about really his process when it comes to player evaluation and projecting guys from college to the NFL. We jump into a bunch of topics that, really kind of speak to what all NFL teams are doing, especially right now. You're all kind of self-evaluating, self-scouting, not just coaches, but the player evaluators as well. All the scouts are fine-tuning their craft, trying to get better in every little area. And if you can get 1% better, once a summer, that really allows you to get better over the course of your career. So I think when you look at this conversation with Mike Tannenbaum, hope you guys are able to pull some information out of it. I know that I did. I always take copious notes whenever I have a guest like Mike on, and we covered some great stuff. So we'll hit that at the top here in Mr. Relevant. After that, Ben Fennell is back. We're going to do another set of division recaps here today. We've got the NFC West and the AFC West, so we'll go through those 8 teams, what they did in the draft. All of these teams in the NFL all feel great about what they did back in April, right, with all the players that they were able to bring into the building. So we want to go and say, all right, well, what was the thought process here? Why are they so excited? What are some of the things that match up in terms of their strategy and their team-building philosophies? We're going to go over the top with a lot of this stuff, so really hope you guys enjoyed that conversation with Ben. We're not giving out draft grades and things like that. I think that stuff is a little bit silly, a little bit overblown. I know a lot of fans love it, but that's just not the way that I roll. I like talking about the back end of it, the team building philosophy, and just kind of how the sausage is made. Really, really like that part of it. So excited to jump into that a little bit there with Ben. But that'll do it. It's going to be a really, really fun show. Real quick reminder, for those of you who can, go on to Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, throw us a rating, throw us a comment. If you've got a question, we will answer it here on the show. This is the time of year where we can kind of go off the beaten path a little bit because we've only got one more week here of draft recap. So if there's something that you want us to cover here on the show, just head on to Apple Podcasts, leave a comment, and we'll make a whole show out of it here in the next couple of weeks. And I've got some great news for our listeners coming up for what we've got here in the fall. I cannot wait to share it. I'm going to share it here in a few weeks. But that being said, let's not waste any more time. Let's jump into our chat now with Mike Tannenbaum. It's time for Mr. Relevant.
It's time for Mr. Relevant.
We're really excited to welcome into this week's Journey to the Draft podcast, longtime NFL executive, former general manager, Mike Tannenbaum. Mike, welcome back to the Journey to the Draft podcast. Appreciate you joining us here this spring, this summer.
Yeah, Fran, great to be with you. Hope you're safe and your family's doing well.
Appreciate it. Same to you, man. And we're going to do the same thing that we've done over the last couple of weeks, where we're going to dive in and really kind of get into the nitty-gritty of the evaluation process and just kind of get some anecdotes from you, really kind of pick your brain. And we'll kind of just start things off. Just take us through your background, how you got into the business and your background as far as player evaluation, just how you got going in the business.
Sure. So I graduated from the University of Massachusetts in 1991. They had a program in sports management, and that kind of confirmed what I wanted to do in terms of working in sports, and went to Tulane Law School, and always tell people that, my plan was luck, and hopefully people could have a much more well thought out plan than mine. But if you think about in 1990, well, it was 93, the New Orleans Saints were the only pro team in the city of New Orleans, and there was a once in a 75-year event where the players got free agency, the owners got cost certainty in the form of the salary cap, and I was at Tulane Law School. So I worked for 2 gentlemen, Chet Franklin, who was the assistant GM, and Bill Kuharic, and for a year and a half, I drove people to the airport, made highlight tapes for draft, and learned the salary cap. And then I put a book together when I graduated law school in terms of how to build a team in the salary cap era. And I sent it out to every team, to every head coach, every GM. And at the time, there was 30 teams. I got 29 rejections. And Mike Lombardi and Coach Belichick hired me in Cleveland. And I went out there. Great experience. It was a short one, but I spent the 95 season there. More of the same, contract research, driving people to the airport. Incredible group of guys from Eric Mangini, Jim Schwartz, Thomas Dimitroff, Ozzie Newsome, Mike Lombardi, Scott Pioli. It was incredible. and very, very fortunate to be part of a really just dynamic group of people. The 95 Browns became the Ravens. I went back to the Saints. I spent the 96 season there. And then following the 96 season, Coach Parcells and Coach Belichick left the Patriots and went to the Jets. And I got hired to do basically come in and start negotiating contracts on behalf of the team. And one of the many things I try to tell people, Fran, there's a difference between your job and your career. So I got my foot in the door because of a law degree and the time in the salary cap, but I was very passionate about being a GM. So I was able to enhance and develop other skills like evaluations by getting my foot in the door, paying my dues, and just looking for more responsibility along the way.
So take us through that evaluation process that you honed. Obviously, quite a melting pot that you were with out in Cleveland to get that thing started. And by the time you started to really kind of hit your stride, take us through inside that evaluation process. How did you decide how much to watch on a kid? How many games? How did you pick those games? Take us through when you're getting ready to sit down and watch it after the first time.
Yeah, and I would tell people this: like, you should always act, dress, and use the words of the position you want to have. And I wanted to be a GM. And I wanted to move up the ladder. So I would write reports until a lot before they mattered because, I started off on sort of one part of football administration. So I really took any opportunity I could. And what I tried to do was, and I learned this early from a gentleman named Chet Franklin, who was one of my mentors along the way. He always talked about benchmarking in terms of if you're looking at a tight end, Fran, study the best tight ends and then start measuring players against that's the standard. So I did that early on, and I got an opportunity to run the pro department of the Jets probably before I was ready as an evaluator, but I worked so hard and I was going to leave the building. I got that opportunity under Al Groh, and Coach Parcells was the GM. And another big influence in my career early on was a gentleman named Dick Haley, who was basically responsible for those great Pittsburgh Steelers teams of the 70s. And we spent a ton of time together. And he taught me some really fundamental axioms. And I think that's when I start understanding that you could put, and now everyone calls it analytics, but really benchmarking and prototypes. And Coach Parcells and Dick Haley were huge into prototypes. So that was a big influence in my career early on, especially on the pro side. In terms of if a guy didn't have the requisite height, weight, and speed, we may take the player, but he had to have something redeeming. And one of the early lessons was somebody like Jason Fabini, who had a really slow 40 time. We got him from the University of Cincinnati in the fourth round. We're maybe he could play right tackle. Jason Fabini wound up being a really great left tackle. He had great instinct, short area quickness. And despite running a 5.4 in the 40, he played left tackle at a high level. So one of the lessons I would pass along is it's not the time speed, it's the play speed. And what if the player doesn't have the requisite prototype? Again, that goes all the way back to Bucko Kilroy, who was the godfather of the typing system, going way back to the mid-'70s Fran with the New England Patriots. And that was a big influence in Coach Parcells in terms of how he studied and evaluated players. And that was even honed by a gentleman named George Young, who was a longtime GM of the New York Giants, who worked with Coach Parcells. And they were always about size and how much size mattered. And basically, you needed the requisite physical attributes at each position. So I would say between Dick Haley, Coach Parcells, Al Groh was another big height, weight, speed guy. That was a big influence on my career early on.
Interesting. Yeah, I know that. I've done so much reading about Bill Parcells. His philosophy, Bill Belichick, his philosophy. Obviously, all coming from that same tree from George Young, and you read about the planet theory and all these different things that he's thrown around with the axioms. When you talk about the height, weight, speed element, were those steadfast rules at one point for any? I guess different with each of those guys when they were in charge, or were they more just kind of guidelines to follow? You talked about guys like Jason Fabini. There's always outliers, but how hard did you kind of stay along those rules?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I think there's a critical difference for the audience here. The difference between a rule and a guideline. Those are guidelines. And I'll give you another great example. And I always feel like, even to my last couple of years with the Dolphins, I always said the same thing to the room, which was these are going to be guidelines. And to the extent it puts guardrails on our decisions, let's do that, knowing that we could go outside the purview of those guidelines, but let's have a really good reason. So great examples are guys like Wes Welker, and certainly Edelman falls into this. These are guys that did not have great vertical speed, Fran, but they had really good change of direction, like a 3-cone or a short shuttle. And because of that, you could think about taking them later on.
Take us into the seat of the general manager. When you're in that role, when does the player evaluation process start for you from a college standpoint? Where in the calendar year does that begin?
Yeah, for me, it's basically it's like after Memorial Day. Like we'll get the initial list from National Scouting, and I'll get like a pretty like basic idea of like where the strengths of the draft will be. And I think what you have to do early on is really start your strategic planning. So if you're with a team, Fran, and you need a left tackle, and this draft coming up looks like on paper it's going to be loaded at tackle, you're probably going to spend more time on the draft than you are in free agency, let's say, at that position. So you always think about what's the highest and best use of resources for your team, knowing that there's very few ways to improve your squad. So, but to answer your question, it's really in May and June, you kind of put your list together. And I would try to get out to games when I could travel with the team, maybe go to a Thursday night game, meet up with the team, or Saturday, and then drive over and just try to be opportunistic. And I felt like that was also a way to keep my contacts fresh, like in the college coaching ranks. So that was also really important. And then as the fall went on, if a player emerged or something we knew we were going to have to work on, I would either tweak my schedule or, just try to do more of that film work in the office.
Yeah, I feel like that's such a big part of it that fans don't always get that sense of, it's a big picture. It's not just the draft. It's not just free agency. You got to take it all into account. There's trades and everything else, the waiver wire, of course, as well throughout the course of the fall. Let me ask you this question. What do you feel were your biggest strengths or are your biggest strengths as an evaluator?
I think being a good listener and having a sense of like what really plays on the pro side of things. Because I spend making sure that if just trying to get this thing to stay here. Just from a standpoint of understanding like the again, not just the prototypes, but the standards of what's being successful is really, really important. And then understanding that if we're going to go outside that purview again, making sure that we're drilling down to say, like, we're going to go outside of it, but we have a really good reason. So I would say the balance of having rigor in the process, but also being pragmatic. And I think that balance, candidly, Fran comes with experience and the confidence to say, hey, we're going to go outside of this, but here's why. And when you look at some of the slot receivers like Troy Brown, Wes Welker, Julian Edelman, Wayne Corbett, I think that's really good examples of when players have earned their right to the team by having value on fourth down in the kicking game and then developing skills to play, on regular downs. So, I think that's a great example of melding, taking – again, when you get a guy like Corbett, you get lucky or you get guys at the end of the draft, but the lessons are really important of, again, trying to see what they can do and work to their strengths and how are they earning their keep as they're getting better.
Then when you reflect back to early in your career and you look at the areas where you had to improve, how did you get better? What were some of the things that you did to kind of hone in on your weaknesses?
Yeah, I do this to this day. I try to talk to people all the time and ask open-ended questions, Fran. I just love learning, and I've been really fortunate with my situation at ESPN, and I work with a lot of interns from UMass and a couple other places around the country, and we have weekly calls. We have a couple of former head coaches in the NFL that sit in on a call, and I always tell them that, look, I want to get off these calls and learn and hear what you're doing differently. So if I'm not learning, that's just something that's a core value of mine. I'm very passionate about that. I always feel like there's room for improvement in anything you do.
I worked for Coach Golden, Al Golden, for 5-6 years at Temple. And one of the biggest quotes I still take to this day, and I still use it, I have it hung up on my wall, is when you're through learning, you're through. And that's something that I always kind of take to heart in terms of just how I view not just player evaluation, but everything when it comes to my job.
There's a great quote about that, which says, the key to life is what you learn once you know it all.
There we go. Exactly. Right. It's all the same stuff. Like, to me, I'm always trying to improve, always trying to figure out, all right, where are ways where I can, and with this topic, there are all the different positions, all the different elements of that transition from college to the NFL. There's so much to look at for sure. What are some things that based off, and you've already hit on some of these, but I love it. What are some of the things that based off your own experiences, off the people that you've worked with, that you feel are kind of specific to you, or maybe not even specific just to you, but different than what the norm is for how you evaluate players and how you project players from college to the NFL, or from a pro scouting standpoint as well?
Yeah, I think for me, again, it goes back to competing against New England for so many years between the Jets and Dolphins. Like, how do we win the division? Like, I guess I would get very compartmentalized, and this was a big thing that Coach Belichick taught, which was what can the player do? Like, what's the vision for what he can do, not can't do, and then like I would try to take that like 5 steps further down the road, Fran, to the extent of like, okay, if we sign this player, like, what's his third down value? How's he being paid? Is there another player at his position that's graduating? Like, how's he fit in? So, like, to me, I'm always thinking strategically, like, how he fits into the overall plan.
Was that like, did you guys have like a living flow chart of, here are the guys that are, reaching a certain age, or guys that are getting to a certain part of their contract and have to take all of that into account when evaluating guys for the draft?
It was all Coach Parcells. And, it's funny. I was very fortunate from 1997 until 2000. I was around him every day, and my binder all the way up to 2018 in Miami was same subject binders, same sort of like organizational skills that he had, and it was very just compartmentalized. And it was always the way my boards were set up. It was always like, here are our starters, here's our roster, and here's opening day, here's September of the following year. And let's keep, winning for today and developing for tomorrow.
Yeah, it's certainly something that, again, I'm trying to peel back the curtain a little bit for the fans. Is there something that you feel, part of that when you're talking about the whole draft process from start to finish that you feel is talked about too much? And then I guess on the other coin of it as well, is there something that's not talked about enough?
Yeah, I would think like, Indy measurements are like, we talk about those quite a bit, and they're important, but they're part of the story. Or if a player had a bump in the road, they were late, they had an arrest, look, if you're in college for 3 or 4 years, if you have exemplary behavior and you have a bump in the road, well, it's a bump in the road. So the context sometimes is missing with the media.
How long did it take you to feel really good about a player's evaluation? Like, by the time you sat down, like, did it take 5-6 games? Was it like, all right, I'm going to watch 6 games and I want to meet him, I want to talk to the coach, I want to talk to 6 sources? What point did you say, like, all right, I feel really good, I can put this guy to bed?
Yeah, that's really like player dependent. Like Darrelle Revis, we had to do a ton of work on him because he was a late declaring junior. He came out of the then Big East. Not a lot was known about him, Fran. So I think I don't know if there's a magical answer on that. I think sometimes it. Sanchez, for example, he flashed big time in the Rose Bowl, and it was like, we got to do more on this guy. So every situation to me is different. I don't know if there's like a magical answer for that one.
Did you have a favorite position to study?
I like corner. I don't know why, but I love like the essence. I think Rex probably influenced me on that. Rex always talks about, let's go get long basketball players. Let's get guys that can compete and play man to man. And for me, like, that was very simple and understanding. Like, all right, like, if we're going to get players that fit the head coach's vision, like, let's go get guys. Like, we all know exactly what they should look like. And those were really fun years for me because we couldn't get enough corners. Like, we had Revis, we traded for Cromartie, we drafted Cowell. Like, we couldn't get enough of them. And that was I really enjoyed that. It was very clear what he wanted.
Is it fun when you're transitioning from? I mean, obviously, when you're transitioning from one staff to the next, there's got to be some bad times in that. But is it fun when you're kind of trying to? You talked about fitting a team to a coach's vision, like kind of saying, all right, we're gonna build this thing from the ground up and really cater to what this coach wants.
Yeah, I mean, I was energized when we transitioned in Miami. Gase came in and felt great about Tannehill, and we went to the playoffs in the first year, and but for some injuries, obviously things may have turned out differently there. So I draw a lot of energy, from the other. Herm Edwards came in and followed Coach Parcells and Al Groh and went to the playoffs 3 out of 5 years. Did a lot of great things, and we transitioned a whole bunch of players and schemes. So I like to. I think it works best, Fran, when everyone's on the same page to understand what the head coach wants, and there's tremendous alignment behind that vision.
what's the best advice that you would give to fans and to listeners of the show that, maybe they don't want to be scouts, or maybe some of them do, but, maybe they just want to be better fans, smarter fans. They would, be the smartest guy in the room when they're watching the game. What's the best advice that you would give those people?
Yeah, let's just stick with the Eagles for a second. Like, I think they did a great job last year when you think about like Dallas Goedert or 2 years ago for with him, last year trading up for the Washington State tackle.
Dillard, yep.
Yeah, Andre Dillard, like that, the tape sets the floor, character sets the ceiling. Like, I think trading up for Dillard, knowing that Houston was probably going to take him, was a great move. Taking Goedert, the fact that you have Ertz, like, he's going to get better. So having patience and having a vision, like, I think those players, like Dillard's feet fits exactly what Coach Peterson wants in tackles. And to that extent, like, he may not be perfect for everybody, but he's going to be really good for them.
Yeah, you mentioned the one of my other favorite quotes, and I know Bill Belichick had said this. It was the character sets the floor, the talent sets the floor, character sets the ceiling. Certainly one of my favorites. Real quick, I want to get you out of here. Last one. When it came to, everyone talks about best player available versus drafting for need. Do you feel like people's like steadfast on that, or does that kind of evolve over time?
Yeah, I think that's a little bullshit because I think in this day and age, like, you have to tip your hand towards, what your needs are. I mean, there's very few exceptions to that. Maybe Coach Belichick is the rarest of exceptions, but we could sit here and look at this year's draft, and it kind of all we could look at from Jeff Okudah to Isaiah Simmons. I mean, you could pick out any of the first round tackles. I mean, it would be hard pressed to show me where ideally it's always going to be board, but it's just the necessity and the money, Fran. You have to tip towards need, and you just sit there and hope it works out. I could actually give you a great story of when Laramie Tunsil was our first player on the board in 2016. He's doing something before the draft that, the timing was poor for him, but we did our homework. He was a great player and a good person who had made a mistake. At left tackle was a good player, and Brandon Albert. We drafted Tunsil. He played left guard year one, and the rest is history. He's now the highest paid tackle in the league. The point being was we stuck to the board, but that still was a need. Now, the need wasn't as apparent, maybe, because Brandon Albert on paper was our tackle, but clearly we felt short term we could be better at guard, which was important, and then long term we have the tackle. So the point is, rarely nowadays are you going to draft a player and say he's going to develop for 2 years. Our sport is just not in that place anymore.
It's a great point there. Mike, thanks so much for joining us here once again on the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA. Stay safe, stay healthy. Hope to talk to you again soon.
Okay, thanks.
Now more than ever, we have come to understand the importance of celebrating special moments with those we love. The Eagles Autism Foundation and Children's Hospital of Philadelphia want to help you commemorate these occasions. Throughout June, you will have the unique opportunity to recognize someone special by posting a message on the video board at Lincoln Financial Field. Visit PhiladelphiaEagles.com/Eagles Autism Foundation to learn how to celebrate with a shout-out.
Now it's time for Draft Buzz.
Well, back for another edition of Draft Buzz here on the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA. Our friend Ben Fennell. You can follow him on Twitter at BenFennell_NFL. And we're going to go through the divisional recaps for both the NFC West and the AFC West. We're going to go through all of the teams' picks. Why did they make the selection at the top of the draft? A day three sleeper, some overall themes that we can we can kind of take away from each of these squads, and then also someone to keep an eye on from the undrafted ranks as well. And we're going to start with the team that had the first pick for the NFC West, and that's the Arizona Cardinals. They picked 8th overall in this draft, and just running through these picks. First round, 8th overall, they go with the Clemson linebacker, Isaiah Simmons, and they did say he is a linebacker, not a safety, so something interesting to kind of take away from that. 3rd round, they didn't have another pick until the 3rd round of the draft after the DeAndre Hopkins trade, so 3rd round, they get the Houston left tackle, Josh Jones, falling to them at 72 overall. That was a good get for them in the 3rd round. A couple of 4th-round picks here. Leki Fotu, the defensive tackle from Utah, and then the defensive tackle Rashard Lawrence out of LSU. 6th-round pick, linebacker Evan Weaver from Cal. 7th-round pick, running back Eno Benjamin from Arizona State. So a homegrown product there to round out the draft for the Cardinals. So let's go back to Isaiah Simmons. Ben, dude, you and I talked about Isaiah Simmons so much this past fall and, his transition, how he was going to project, what role is he best fit. Why was he the pick here for the Arizona Cardinals? And, just as we sit here now, how do you kind of view his projection? What do you think is going to happen here with him on this squad?
Well, great to join you again here, Fran. And we can argue his down-to-down usage, but at the end of the day, you're getting a middle-of-the-field playmaker. Whether he's going to be a back-end player for you, a blitzer on that second level, like a true linebacker, or maybe a QB spy and just a traditional third down sub-package rusher. He's a big player in the middle of the field with tremendous speed, athleticism, explosiveness, and at the end of the day, he's going to make plays for you in the middle of the field and affect the game. And I think that's what you want to have a playmaker on your defense in 2020. I think every team needs that jack of all trades, hybrid player that doesn't have to come off the field. Whether you want to call him a safety, a linebacker, an edge player, that's up to you. He's going to be on the field. He's not coming off the field. And most often, he's going to be lined up between the numbers, middle of the field. And I see here he's kind of pegged in as their will linebacker, maybe next to our old friend Jordan Hicks, former Philadelphia Eagle down there at Arizona Cardinals. But at the end of the day, athletic, playmaking, impact player in the middle of the defense, Fran.
Yeah, and I think when you look at Arizona Cardinals general manager Steve Keim, this is a guy who's been installed there for 8 years, okay? A handful of different coaches. So he's got an identity. There are some trends that have developed here. And I don't want to go too deep into like over the top and other big takeaways, but just looking at the first round, look, age matters to them. They select a lot of guys who are 21 years old, and Isaiah Simmons is one of those guys. They go for speed over pure athleticism more often than not. And this is a guy who, he runs in the 4.3s, low 4.4s. The big thing, though, and this is, to me, why I always felt like that Isaiah Simmons-Arizona Cardinals match made sense in the top 10, because a lot of people pegged offensive tackle to them. Obviously, before the Nuke Hopkins deal, this is going to be where one of the receivers go off the board. Look at their draft history. Look at some of the guys that they've taken early in the draft, first 3 rounds. Budda Baker, Hassan Reddick, Deion Buchanan, Tyrann Mathieu, right? You're talking about guys that fit that positionless player model, those extremely versatile players on the back 7 that can wear a lot of different hats, be used in a lot of different ways. What position is he? What's his best fit? They love collecting those guys. And it hasn't just been when Todd Bowles was the defensive coordinator. It hasn't just been when Bruce Arians was there. It hasn't just been when, whoever you want at the coaching, in terms of a coaching staff. They have selected these guys consistently with Steve Keim as the general manager. I can't help but think that that's something that he looks for and that he values, is that versatility there on the back 7 of the defense. And Isaiah Simmons certainly fit that mold. So, that was one of the big reasons why I felt like he was the pick. Let's go here to day 3. We talked about a couple of day 3 picks. They had 4 overall. Who was your favorite of those day 3 picks, Ben?
Well, and at the end of the day, adding Isaiah Simmons, they only had 17 takeaways last year. That was 27th in the NFL. You got to get the ball back to the offense, and just the teams at the top of the turnover takeaways, they just always have a fighting chance. They're in every game. They're contending teams. They're playoff teams, and not just because they have prolific offenses. They have defenses. They get the ball back. But on day 3, Eno Benjamin falling to the 7th round, Fran. I would have never thought, talking about this kid last summer, was a bit of a one-year player before 2019, and I thought he had a better year in 2018, and that's probably why his draft stock really sank, in my opinion. But he catches the ball pretty well in the backfield. He's got good contact balance. He's going to be an absolute screen nightmare on third down in the pass game. Reminded me a lot of Aaron Jones coming out of UTEP and what he turned into for the Green Bay Packers. And also a little bit unsung with the draft order and the pecking order, falling all the way, to the 7th round. And Aaron Jones was a 4th or 5th round pick 3 or 4 years ago, but similar trajectory. And I just think he's going to be a better pro and really contribute to somebody on third down.
To me, Benjamin was my pick as well, but I will mention Leki Fotu here. And one just interesting note from talking to a lot of those Utah defensive players in this draft, whether it was down at the Senior Bowl, Shrine Game, or at the Combine, I would ask them, hey, who's one of your teammates that you'd bring with you to the NFL? To a man, every single one of them said I want to bring Leki Fotu with me. So to me, I think that kind of speaks to the value that he brings to a defense. They selected a similar player there in the 4th round as well in Rashard Lawrence. So adding to that 3-4 front for Vance Joseph there in the 4th round of this draft. Let's go over the top here. I talked about some of the takeaways with Steve Keim, just a couple of other ones. All 4 day 3 picks this year. So you're talking Fotu, Lawrence, Evan Weaver, Eno Benjamin. All 4 of those guys were seniors. All 4 of them were team captains. And if you go back and you read some quotes from Steve Keim over the years, he consistently talks about how they're always searching for those alpha males, those guys that are leaders in the clubhouse, that lead the position room. They certainly targeted those guys there on day 3 in this draft. So certainly a theme to keep an eye on here moving forward. But another big one, we've talked a lot over the last couple of weeks, and I consistently bring up this team values Power 5 talent. This team values guys from big schools. Well, Arizona is a team that is not afraid to dive into the small school ranks. Just a list of some of the schools that Steve Keim has drafted from since he's been the GM. Morgan State, Fordham, Grambling, Midwestern State, Harvard, Southeast Louisiana, Northern Iowa, Delaware State, Pittsburgh State, Murray State, James Madison, and they took the pass rusher Hassan Reddick from Temple, obviously a group of 5 school in the 1st round, though, in the top 15. So this is a team, a general manager, not afraid to take guys from the small school ranks. So there's just another big takeaway there from the Arizona Cardinals. Let's go undrafted sleeper. Who's a name that you picked out from the guys that they signed after the draft, Ben?
Couple interesting guys. I like Reggie Floyd on the back end, a free safety from Virginia Tech, and Cedric Bird from Hawaii. He's a really productive slot receiver, bit of small hands, some drop issues here and there. But looking at this stable of running backs, Fran, in Arizona, I don't know where it came from. It's almost like a 1-year reclamation project. You got Kenyon Drake, you got Chase Edmonds, who we both like. They have DJ Foster, that former Arizona State kind of dual threat back. We just talked about Eno Benjamin. But Eno's also going to have to beat out this undrafted free agent Jonathan Ward out of Central Michigan, who's a really prolific running back, not only running the ball with 2,000-yard seasons in 2019 and 2017, but catching the ball in the backfield. He's got 98 career receptions, a lot of 2-back sets. They'll leak them out in screens. They'll leak them vertically. So that's an interesting group of running backs collectively. I think Jonathan Ward's a nice player, but in combination with DJ Foster, Eno Benjamin, Chase Edmonds, and Kenyon Drake, we know what he can do in the pass game. Really interesting stable of backs there for Cliff Kingsbury in that offense.
I went with the corner, also kind of a homegrown talent there in Arizona corner, Jace Whitaker. This is a guy that played early and often, early on in his career, dealt with some injury issues, and I think that's part of the reason why he fell out of the draft. But this is a really scrappy kid, really instinctive kid. Just knowing the kind of corners that play for Vance Joseph, I feel like he's going to be an inside corner for them, but I think he's got that skill set to be able to stick. To me, would not be a shock if he made this roster out of the summer, out of training camp. So keep an eye on.
And he was actually the highest rated Arizona Wildcat player coming into the season.
Yep.
So he was a guy that they had big expectations for. Didn't really have the season he expected, but he's got a lot of talent out there at corner.
So let's get to the San Francisco 49ers now. And look, they made that trade with DeForest Buckner. That put them into the top 15. They ended up trading down 1 slot to the 14th overall selection and selecting Javon Kinlaw, the defensive tackle from South Carolina, to replace DeForest Buckner. We talked a lot about how, I don't know, I feel like Henry Ruggs he would make a lot of sense. He'd make a lot of sense. Then Mike Mayock jumps in and takes him with 12th overall pick. But Javon Kinlaw, certainly not a bad compensation prize there for the San Francisco 49ers. They get him at 14. Then they trade up again and take wide receiver Brandon Ayuk out of Arizona State. Only 3 picks there for the rest of the draft. West Virginia tackle Colton McKivitz, who he just has like a look of a Kyle Shanahan tackle. It just makes sense there for the 49ers. The tight end, Charlie Werner from Georgia, he was actually acquired in a trade with the Eagles when the Eagles were able to trade for Marquise Goodwin. So they took Georgia tight end Charlie Werner with that selection, and then Tennessee wide receiver Jawan Jennings to round things out. So only 5 picks here for the San Francisco 49ers for the NFC champs. But let's get to these 2 first-round picks. And Ben, I'll let you pick here between Kinlaw and Ayuk. Why do you feel like those guys were targeted there in round 1?
Well, Kinlaw, obviously they needed some defensive tackle help since sending DeForest Buckner to Indianapolis. But Kinlaw, I think his best football is ahead of him. He's down about 30 pounds heading into his senior season. A lot of times he was stuck, facing double and triple teams and 3-man rushes on that defensive line, not given a whole lot of opportunities to get upfield or attack one-on-one. The best game is when that South Carolina team walked in and beat number 1 Georgia. And Javon Kinlaw, I don't know what went down in the stat sheet, but he was up Jake Fromm's butt all game. I don't think he had any sacks, but forced a lot of pressures. And that was kind of his career at South Carolina, making a lot of impact plays that really don't show up in the stat sheet. So you may look at his sack total or TFL total, and it's really, leaves a little bit to be desired. Part of it was scheme, usage. I think he was a little bit overweight most of his career, also took care of a hip issue over the summer. I really think his best football is ahead of him. And Brandon Ayuk, man, he just looks like Deebo Samuel. He's that running back body, thick lower half, thick bubble butt. And the first note I have in Brandon Ayuk's report here, in bold, accelerates through the catch point. And that's what I absolutely loved about Deebo Samuel. Not only running that gauntlet at the Combine last year where you first saw it, but all those in-breakers and RPOs. He ran 4.4, but did Kyle Shanahan send him down the field all last year? Nope. It was quick game, RPO, get the ball in his hands. And the first step to productive yards after catch is strong, confident hands and accelerating through that catch point. And whether you're going to have Deebo on the left side now and Brandon Ayuk out on that right side, good luck and pick your poison. Now, I know they don't have Emmanuel Sanders anymore out there on that the skill position, but adding Brandon Ayuk to that already explosive offense, man, that's exciting.
Yeah, that's the thing is like I see the comparisons there with Deebo. You love the yards after catch, get the ball in his hands. I think he's got a little bit more juice. I know he ran like 4 or 5 flat or whatever it was out in Indy, but he had that injury that he was kind of dealing with. Ended up getting the surgery after the Combine. This is a guy that's got that ability to stretch the field. He's got outstanding ball skills. A lot of the reasons why I kind of liked Henry Ruggs going there. Some of the same reasons why I feel like Ayuk is a great fit. And he kind of brings that edge that they like. He's still a little bit raw. But he showed some potential as a route runner. That is a precision offense, but it's also an offense that even if you're coming along as a route runner, they'll find ways to get you in space and get you the football. And to me, like that's the scary proposition there with Ayuk, as you mentioned, getting.
So, Fran, let me ask you a question really fast. When you look at a player like Brandon Ayuk, what do you think is more impactful in your mind coming from Indianapolis? That 4.50 40, or maybe that 40-inch vertical leap that he also put up that really showed that lower body explosiveness?
To me, it's all like I feel like the game. It is a big play league, but it's a game of 10-yard bursts, right? It's a game of explosiveness and power. Yep. So to me, like that's why I like the 10. I love a guy that, especially when you're talking skill players, you like the long 40s, but the 10-yard splits, the jumps, the examples of explosiveness, of power in an athlete's body. To me, like that's what the game's about. And I look at Ayuk, and certainly he's got that in his skill set.
I also love just the way he responded to his 40. He almost like looked at it twice. Man, I don't remember the last time I ran 4.5.
Right.
Just seeing that reaction just gave me the confidence. Like, okay, I think he knows he's faster than that. I think he'll be okay.
There are some guys, and you talk with coaches like they're just used to being fast their whole life. And I feel like Ayuk is certainly one of those guys who was always the fastest kid out in the playground. Who's your favorite pick from day 3 for this team?
Day 3, we were just talking about Colton McKivitz there, but we talked about Juwan Jennings quite a bit this season from the University of Tennessee, a little bit of an underachieving program there. It's actually the 6th ranked dual threat quarterback coming out of high school behind Sam Darnold and some of those other cats. But a big physical receiver, might be a couple pounds away from being a move tight end, in my opinion.
I'm so glad you said that. I was going to ask you, like, comparing him to Jalen Hurts from last year. He was like the 3rd round pick.
That's a great comparison there. I'll really quick just pull up his notes and see what other names I have written down. I think I really love the Brandon Marshall comp, just seeing his physical yards after catch, the strong hands, but he might be a little heavier than that. I think Brandon was a little bit faster and had that big play ability over the top. But Juwan was really good in the red zone, strong hands, contested catches. And I remember watching an SEC film room piece over the summer with him, and he just talked for 20 minutes about blocking. And to see his enthusiasm for wanting to block, it was just like I put a note next to that kid. That's a kid you want on your team because he looks like he's going to do whatever you ask him to do with energy, enthusiasm, and a little bit of that physicality, which you love out of skill players.
Yeah, I was interested to see because he's a lot different. We're talking about like very different skill sets between him and Ayuk, but that same mindset, that same edge. You talk about his love for blocking, like that. I think that kind of
or just fighting defenders. He had 30 broken tackles on 59 catches this year.
He
got the ball and went into fight mode immediately. It was great. You can watch him as a true freshman catching a Hail Mary against Georgia. This guy always had that kind of alpha mindset. He may not have the twitch or the speed, but he's wired right between the ears.
Yeah, we'll just get to some of the over-the-top takeaways here from this team. And look, John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, they've only been there for a handful of years, but you start to get a sense of like the identity. Like what does a San Francisco 49er draft pick look like? And I feel like those guys, I mentioned it, they kind of have that little bit of an edge, a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, whether it's on offense or defense. That's certainly one thing that you kind of see from a lot of these guys. And the other big one, the first 2 years, they had a lot of guys that tested really, really well, high spark guys, with the athletic testing and, across the board, really, really good. The last two, they haven't. And I know Kyle Shanahan is a guy that's like, I don't, not that he doesn't care about the numbers, but the athletic testing doesn't matter as much to me. I want guys that play fast on film and, the tape outweighs everything else. I kind of wonder if there's a little bit of a shift in philosophy there, in terms of the way that they've been looking at things. But that was one of the interesting things over the last 2 years. They seem to, you talk about Jawan Jennings. He was not a guy that tested very well. Kinlaw didn't test the way people thought. Ayuk didn't test the way people thought, but they were able to come away with those guys. And obviously, a lot of people feel that they're more athletic than what they showed, out in Indianapolis. So that was one of my big takeaways here from this 49ers team. How about an undrafted sleeper here? Who's a name that you want to watch this summer?
Yeah, real quick. I was kind of impressed with Jared Maiden, the Alabama defensive back. I'm not going with him, all right? I'm calling his name out. I really liked him. He was a interesting corner coming out of the state of Texas as a recruit. Had to be a safety special teamer there in Alabama. But I thought these running backs are interesting, particularly Salvin Ahmed at the University of Washington. He was stuck behind Myles Gaskin for 2 years. He was a high recruit, just stuck behind a veteran presence there. And I thought he had a little bit more upside maybe to show this past season and could squeeze into the day 3 conversation with what he can do in the pass game. But a guy that I think has some opportunity to compete and maybe get some playing time.
Yeah, I went with Jared Maiden. You kind of mentioned some of the things I liked about him. I thought he was just really solid across the board. Seeing him up close during the All-Star game process, I thought he had solid athletic tools. I thought his speed was fine. I thought he had good ball skills. He's a tough kid. He's a versatile kid. I just thought that was a solid addition.
Fran, he's going to be a guy. He's going to be a special teams captain in like a year. Just watch, right?
Yep. No, I think he certainly has that mindset, that skill set. All right, let's get to the Seattle Seahawks here. Didn't pick till late in round 1. Go with Jordan Brooks, the linebacker from Texas Tech, one of the big surprises for a lot of people in round 1. There had been a lot of buzz over the course of the spring, and we had mentioned here on the podcast. I remember like Alex Marvez saying back in like January, a lot of buzz about this Texas Tech linebacker, Jordan Brooks. He could be a top 50 pick, a top 40 pick, and people were raising their eyebrows like, who? Jordan Brooks? Like, who are you talking about? And he ends up going in the top 30 of this draft. Second round, they go with Darrell Taylor, the pass rusher from Tennessee, a guy that we have talked about a lot here on this program. Third round pick, Damian Lewis, the guard from LSU. A couple of fourth round picks here, Stanford tight end Colby Parkinson, Miami running back DJ Dallas. Remember, they took the running back from Miami, Travis Homer, last year, so they go back to the running back here this year. Fifth round, Alton Robinson, the pass rusher from Syracuse. Sixth round, Florida wideout Freddie Swain. And then seventh round, they take wide receiver tight end Stephen Sullivan from LSU. So let's get to these top picks here, Ben. Why did you feel that Jordan Brooks was the selection here for the Seattle Seahawks?
Jordan Brooks was actually our Big 12, I think it was my Big 12 defensive sleeper last summer. So you guys would have been completely dialed in, just like all other sleepers like Patrick Queen and guys that went high this past year. But lots of experience. Led his team in tackling as a freshman, a junior, and a senior. Has played over 3,000 defensive snaps, over 300 special team snaps. This guy is just experienced with being on the field as a football player, tackling machine. This past year, he was the Mike linebacker in 2018. He was more of that kind of halfway space player. So he's played a variety of positions there. But it's that 3-3-5 scheme. And a lot of the scheme is flowed to the linebackers to be those tackling machines. Whether that was, Nick Kwiatkowski at West Virginia or Scooby Wright at Arizona being a tackling machine. The design of those defenses are to funnel ball carriers to those linebackers. That's why they have high tackling totals. But some of my concerns with Jordan Brooks, he doesn't have to take on a lot of blocks. You keep those guys clean in that 3-3-5 scheme and just go eat ball carriers, and that's what he did. doesn't have to turn and run a whole lot, defending the pass. And he's just an interesting size, Fran. And I don't think anybody really wanted to bring this up around the combine or draft time. He's 5'11", 240. He looks like a fullback out there. Yep. That's a very strange size, height, weight to compete at this day and age in 2020 NFL linebacker world. The Stephen Tullochs, the Curtis Loftons of the world really don't exist anymore. That stumpy, squatty linebacker. Everybody wants range and length and speed and lateral agility. That really isn't Jordan Brooks. But he's an experienced player. He's a tough player, an absolute tackling machine.
Yeah, I studied him back like early in the fall, and then I didn't study him again until very late in the spring. Like I just kind of got like late eyes on him again. And I mean, you're right. I mean, he's 5'11". He's 6. I think he came in at 6 foot even out in Indianapolis. But he's got 33-inch long arms. He's got a 79.5-inch wingspan. For a guy that's that straight, it's almost like the Brandon Ayuk discussion of like for his height. I mean, his arms are that of like a guy who's 6'4", but very, very productive. And he started 45 games over the course of his career. He said, he was like, look, a lot of people talked to me over the course of the pre-draft process and told me that that I reminded them of Bobby Wagner. So they're talking about a guy that, obviously, in Seattle has made a lot of hay for himself. Interesting in terms of how people saw him throughout the course of the pre-draft process. Let's go to the day 3 picks here.
Yeah, really quick, Fran, with Jordan Brooks, though, those two comps I gave, Stephen Tulloch, who was 5'11", 241, he ran 4.84.
Yep.
And then Curtis Lofton, really productive player, played some ball with Atlanta and I think the Saints, 6 foot, 246. He ran 4.79. Jordan Brooks showed up to Indianapolis with that same height and weight and blazed a 4.54. And I think that is what kind of solidified him to being a top 50 player, in my opinion.
I know he went 4.5 flat, a lot of stopwatches, and broke 4.5.
Even better, but I did not expect that, and I did not see that type of speed on tape, in my opinion. But just knowing that he has that metric in a straight line, can contribute in special teams at the very, very least as a young rookie, I was pretty impressed.
Yeah, his run recognition skills I thought were really, really impressive.
Well. And he doesn't miss tackles either. Right, that's the thing. Once he gets his hands on people, he brings you down. And I think that's a tremendous value. At the end of the day, we got to get ball carriers on the ground. Sometimes we oversimplify this game and the roles and the what we're trying to do here. We got to get ball carriers on the ground, and Jordan Brooks is a master at that.
So for day 3 standouts, I'm going to go first here. I'm going to go with the Miami running back DJ Dallas. I mentioned that they took Travis Homer last year, ended up starting the playoff game for them in terms of all the injuries they had in that backfield. With those injuries, they needed another young guy to kind of step in there. DJ Dallas, only a 1-year starter for the Hurricanes, converted wide receiver, though. And I think when you lose a guy like C.J. Prosise, who I believe is still on the free agent market as of this recording, he brings that same similar kind of physical skill set that Prosise did. Prosise, another guy who was a former receiver that they converted to running back. Dallas has that same thing. And when you look at his pass protection skills, what he can do for you on third down, I think that's what easily translates him to the NFL. They like running backs that have that physicality, have that pop. He's got a little bit of that. He's not built like Marshawn or Robert Turbin or Chris Carson or the other guys that they've drafted over the years. But, I think he's got some of that physicality between the tackles while still offering that versatile skill set. So interested to see. I mean, look, he's a 4th-round pick. He's going to make that team. I'm interested to see how he's going to be used in that offense here in 2020. But that's my pick. Who was your pick for day 3 standout for the squad?
Yeah, all you have to do is put on that Florida game earlier in the year to see what DJ Dallas can do, the screen game, pass pro, everything. I think that just leaves me Alton Robinson. And heading into 2019, they had 2 double-digit sack artists returning to school, Alton Robinson, Kendall Coleman, and both really never lived up to what they did in 2018. Alton Robinson had 12 TFLs and 10 sacks in 2018, took a backseat this year, only had 4 sacks. But he did end up getting himself drafted at least. Kendall Coleman did not. But Alton Robinson, he's more of the speed rusher of the group. And at the very end of the day, he's going to get upfield on third downs. He knows how to dip and turn that corner with a good first step. That will always have value in the NFL, being able to turn the corner with speed. Add him in combination with Darrell Taylor, who I thought was the best pure speed rusher in this draft. Love to go high side with that first step. I just think those two are a great mix to add to your pass rushing unit.
Just some over-the-top takeaways. We know, look, the Seattle Seahawks, John Schneider's been there for a while. Pete Carroll's been there for a while. We know they've got their types, right? I talked about with running back, they like those physical guys. They've got some, some pop between the tackles. They like their longer corners. It seems like they've definitely trended when you look at offensive guards, and Damian Lewis certainly fits this. They look for those big physical maulers on the inside. They don't want the smaller, like more athletic, more mobile guys. They want the big physical, punch you in the mouth, get the double teams and those power run schemes and on inside zone, blow people off the ball. Damian Lewis, that's one of the best traits that he's got in his bag. So, look, this is a team that comes from the Ron Wolf tree out in Green Bay, and they are a big prototype kind of operation. They've got ideas of what they want each position to look like. So certainly you can go back and look, what are the body types of these guys? What are the skill sets of these guys? You can kind of start paint a picture here of what they like. That's what they look like on the field. But the other big thing, it's another team that just values like competitiveness, grit, like that's what they value, right? That's something that certainly is up in terms of their priority list. Last week on the show we had Alex Brown on, and I talked about his podcast, Up Close and Personnel. I heard a great story on his podcast, Ben, where Yogi Roth, who had worked with Pete Carroll out of USC and now he's with the Pac-12 network, he told this story on the podcast about Pete Carroll, where, and I don't think this isn't like some big secret, but when he was recruiting at USC, he used to tell all those kids every year, all those recruits, you're going to have a chance to come in and start year one. You can line up. If you're a quarterback, you're going to compete against Matt Leinart, and you're going to hand the ball off to Reggie Bush and Lendell White. And I'm going to make you come in and earn that right to start. At the same point, he would then, on signing day, bring his whole team into the auditorium and show them the reel of all the guys coming in and say, oh, Keith Rivers, here's a linebacker coming to take your job. Here's Ray Maluga coming to take your job. And then, get all those guys riled up and they're jawing with the guy. Like that's the atmosphere that Pete Carroll wants to be able to create. And so that, when you talk about competitiveness and all those kinds of things, that's something that's always going to be present, in that locker room and in that building. Let's go to an undrafted sleeper here, Ben. Who's a name to watch for you for this summer here with the squad?
All right, so I wanted to talk about Dominic Wood-Anderson, the JUCO transfer to Tennessee, big bubble butt tight end with some soft hands. But I'd be remiss to not talk about Anthony Gordon, Fran, because this guy is making this team.
Yeah,
I'm putting Geno Smith's picture up on the bathroom mirror on my locker. I'm coming for Geno, and that's the entire quarterback room. You got Russell Wilson, Geno Smith, Anthony Gordon. I am eat, sleeping, breathing Geno Smith's job. I am coming for that job, and put me down for Anthony Gordon making the 2020 Seahawks.
Yeah, it's that was my pick for that reason. I feel like
talk about Aaron Fuller, Fran.
Yeah, no, dude, I like Aaron Fuller.
He's fun. He's got a bunch of one-handed catches.
He fits those teams. Like they've trended a little bit bigger with some of the receivers they've taken over the years. But like when you look at like Tyler Lockett and some of these other guys they've taken over the years, like that's the small guy that can line up inside, outside, precise route runner, strong hands. Like Aaron Fuller, he fits that to a T.
Well, Fran, at the end of the day, when the Seahawks don't know who they're taking somebody from the Northwest.
Right.
Exactly. Last year they load up on those Utah kids, a linebacker, Marquise Blair, the whole deal. Then turn around and added some Washington State quarterback, Washington receiver. Seems like when in doubt, they go with what they know in the backyard.
That's why I felt Anthony Gordon was my pick as well. All right, let's go to the final team here for the NFC West, and that's the LA Rams. We'll kind of run through some of these picks here. Second round, they had two picks. Cam Akers, the running back from Florida State, leads things off. Obviously, the team cut Todd Gurley. They did draft Darrell Henderson out of Memphis last year, but they add to that with Cam Akers in the second round. Another second-round pick, Van Jefferson, the wide receiver from Florida. That was the selection that was acquired from the Houston Texans in the Brandon Cooks trade, so essentially trading Brandon Cooks for Van Jefferson. A couple of third-round picks here, Alabama pass rusher Terrell Lewis, and then Utah safety Terrell Burgess. So a couple of Terrells on round 3. Fourth round, they go with the Purdue tight end Bryson Hopkins. Round 6, Ohio State safety Jordan Fuller. And then a trio of round 7 selections, Baylor linebacker Clay Johnston, the kicker Sam Sloman, and then Clemson offensive tackle, one of my favorite picks for them in this draft, Tremaine Ankrum, the right tackle for the Clemson Tigers. I actually kind of like some of the things that the LA Rams did here in this draft. But let's go to the second round here, Ben. Between Cam Akers, Van Jefferson, I'll let you take your pick. But what was the reason? What was the purpose for those guys being the selection?
Yeah, great picks all up and down this draft. They didn't have tons of selections, but I really like who they ended up taking. But Cam Akers seems to be the cream of the crop with this draft class, replacing Todd Gurley in that production. And everybody knows it. Cam Akers is going to be a better pro than he was at Florida State. He was a top recruit coming out a couple years ago, a 5-star, a couple 1,000-yard seasons, but absolute dysfunctional offense, dysfunctional coaching staffs, dysfunctional quarterbacks. And they asked Cam Akers to do a lot. He had to survive as a Wildcat quarterback in some games. They brought in Alex Hornibrook from Wisconsin this past year to be the starter, couldn't win the job. I put up a play this past February studying Cam Akers. He threw a pass to Hornibrook on 3rd and 1. Just run the ball to Cam Akers and let him get 1 yard. I did their season opener against Boise State.
Boise, yeah, right.
Took a big touchdown to the house on 4th and 1, I believe.
Yep.
Well, watch that play again. There's like 3 defenders not even blocked, but Cam Akers runs right through them into the house. Had a nice one-handed catch down the seam on our favorite halfback vertical play last year against Florida.
Yep.
So he's always had a little bit of a crush in my opinion, but dysfunctional offensive line, had to do a lot of work behind the line of scrimmage, getting himself out of traffic. But that's what we put value in. We feel like running backs can probably get the yardage you should when it's blocked perfectly. What happens when it's not? I think Cam Akers has made a living getting more than the play is blocked for, creating for himself, literally making something out of nothing. And I think having that as a basis, now suddenly you may have some lanes in the NFL, a couple more creases to squeak through. He's got every bit of 4.47 speed, explosive lower half, thick, powerful, the whole deal. He's an exciting player, Fran.
For a team that plays as much or more 11 personnel than anybody in the league, I do kind of wonder like what this says about Darrell Henderson. Do they kind of view that Cam Akers? Because I think when you look at them, they do have kind of similar skill sets, right? I think some changes here and there, but or some differences rather. But I think Cam Akers, it's going to be very interesting to see how they're used, how they kind of committee this backfield. But I do kind of like the selection for that offense and what he can do with Sean McVay. That's going to be very interesting to see how he's. And
Fran, they really like Malcolm Brown too.
Yeah.
He's a guy that pass protects very well for him on 3rd down. They have John Kelly in that group as well. They also have an intriguing undrafted free agent we'll talk about in a couple minutes. Really interesting running back room. And I think getting rid of the high-dollar, injury-prone Todd Gurley for this type of running back by committee is probably the right choice in 2020.
All right, let's get to day 3 here. And I already mentioned my favorite pick from day 3 in this draft was Tremaine Ankrum for the Rams. And look, a longtime starter at right tackle for Clemson. He was a guy I thought was one of the more natural pass protectors in this draft. And not a guy that, like off the hoof, he's going to be super impressed from his body. I think he might be I think I have this right. I don't want to look this up, but I think he's the shortest offensive tackle drafted in the last decade. When you're talking about a guy, he doesn't necessarily like look the part. A lot of people say, he's got to slide in a guard. I'm letting him play a tackle and seeing if he can fail. Because to me, like you look at some of the other guys, he kind of reminds me of the kid that's out playing left tackle for the Chicago Bears. He reminds me like a Kelvin Beachum. Some of these guys, and we've seen these shorter, squattier tackles come in and find ways to have success because they're smart, they're savvy, just really, really natural pass protectors. And I feel like Ankrum has that skill set. And for a team that honestly, they're always kind of looking for some O-line help lately, especially from a youth standpoint. I think Ankrum certainly is a guy that could find a way to be able to stick and make a nice career for himself out there.
Yeah, and Fran, I have a whole different appreciation for those type of guys after we went to Masterminds over the summer, and we were elbow to elbow with Charles Leno and Marshall Newhouse, and they're a shade over 6'2". Yep. And I'm looking around like, who is this guy here? That's Charles Leno. This is the left tackle of the Bears? No way. And we're really shocked at the lack of length, but he's still an effective, productive, solid player there. And I'm not willing to say just because you're not hitting this metric of height, you can't play that position. I'll let you die there first and then move you around. But I think there's enough working examples of success to cling to. But I'm going to go stay on the offensive side here. Bryson Hopkins out of Purdue. I think he could have been in the conversation for the best tight end in this class. I think some people had Hunter Bryant, ended up going undrafted. And then nobody really knew who that pecking order was going to be, whether it was, the Florida Atlantic kid or Thad Moss, also undrafted. But Bryson Hopkins is going to be a nice pair with Gerald Everett and Tyler Higbee. Really productive player in the pass game. He's a guy I've written down compared to Zach Ertz and Dennis Pitta. So he's not that George Kittle. He's not putting his hand down and moving defensive ends or even blocking linebackers. But he's going to be out in the slot. He's going to be productive on 3rd down. He's going to be a nightmare in the red zone. He had 61 catches this past year in 7 touchdowns. 61 catches for a tight end is tons of production for a tight end. Absolute mismatch in the slot, but overpowered in line. He spent about 50-50 in line in the slot. A couple drop issues here and there, but really good run after catch, yards after catch ability. I think he blocks decent in space. He's 6'3", 238, so he's pretty similar height, weight to Gerald Everett. So I just want to see, is he coming for Everett's job? Can they use them both at the same time? Or is it just kind of a having skill players around, and you can never have too many of them? And I think with Sean McVay's offense, we've seen you add pass catchers and playmakers, and he'll use them.
So the last point was a perfect transition into one of my big takeaways from this team is that I feel like Les Snead, and this is a good strategy to have, when you look at his draft strategy over the years, a lot of guys that impact the passing game and are pass catchers and, thinking with the pass game first. You look at the running backs they've taken. You look at the amount of wide receivers that they're selecting on day 2 and day 3. The running backs with the pass catching skill, the tight end with the pass catching skills. They're constantly looking to surround whoever's playing at quarterback with weapons. And I think that's obviously a good strategy to have. One other thing that I noticed too, Ben, some teams, this could be something, it could be nothing. Some teams, it feels like the Dallas Cowboys, for instance. You look at their draft history; they don't take a lot of guys that were at the Senior Bowl. Whether that's they don't take a lot of seniors, or they go for guys that are maybe a little bit under the radar. Again, it could be purposeful; it could not be. The LA Rams select a ton of players from the Senior Bowl this year. Absolutely no different. You look at that group: Van Jefferson, Terrell Lewis, Terrell Burgess, Bryson Hopkins, Tremaine Ankrum. All were at the Senior Bowl, right? What's that? 5 of their 7 picks, 5 of their 8 picks, all down there in Mobile. I'm just going to scroll through real quick. Just off the top of my head: Aaron Donald, Tavon Austin, Alec Ogletree, Cooper Kupp, Rob Havenstein. I'm just literally going down the list of draft picks for this team. Trey Mason, I'm pretty sure was down there. Sean Mannion was down there. John Johnson was down there. Just going to keep going down here for the next for day 3.
Well, forget the names here, Fran, and just kind of spend 20 seconds on philosophically what's an advantage of taking one of those players as opposed to maybe just waiting for the combine or your pre-draft visits to get to know these kids. Why a Senior Bowl kid over somebody else?
Well, I think it could be one of a couple things here, and I want to kind of continue doing a deeper dive on the Rams to kind of come away with this. But some teams obviously like drafting seniors and older players. They want guys that are a little bit more developed, both physically and off the field as well. So they kind of trend more towards seniors as opposed to younger guys. And there's pluses and minuses to both sides of that discussion. The other part of it is, you get down to the Senior Bowl, you've got more exposure to that player. So depending on what their process is with meeting players and, from a formal setting, trying to get those guys into their suite, and again, that's something we don't always get that benefit of knowing is how often do they spend time with all of those guys when they go down to Mobile. Now, I'm not talking about after practice grabbing a guy for 5 minutes and asking him what his birthday is and what the name of his dog was in high school. I'm talking about getting them at night, and talking to them more down there on top of all the other touch points throughout the course of the pre-draft process. But I think that it's kind of an interesting takeaway there from the Rams. They're a team that certainly seems to be very active when it comes to Senior Bowl players. Let's go to an undrafted takeaway here, an undrafted sleeper rather. Who's a guy that you're expecting to kind of make this team? I think you said you've got a running back on your mind.
Yeah, this guy I've been a huge fan of. I compared him to Devin Singletary, who carved out a nice role with the Buffalo Bills last year coming out of Florida Atlantic. And I think this kid just got completely hurt by not being invited to the combine and then obviously all the pro days getting slashed at the knees. But Xavier Jones at a Southern Methodist, really productive player. This guy had 25 touchdowns this past year, 1,200 yards rushing, 12 runs of 20-plus. He had another 1,000 yards in 2017, so this wasn't some one-year wonder. Didn't throw him the ball a whole lot in the pass game, but when they did, man, he did some big things with it, whether it's the screen game, swing passes, angle routes. He really looks a lot like Devin Singletary, a little bit undersized, but tons of wiggle, has the home run speed, and I think he's going to be a third down back in the conversation for Sean McVay there with that big stable of backs. I don't really know who that third down player is going to be. It seems like it'll be a combination of Cam Akers or Darrell Henderson. But Xavier Jones, if he can maybe contribute in special teams, find another way to contribute, I really like this tape.
I'm going to go with a guy that we talked about, his teammate Eno Benjamin falling a little bit further than we expected. But how about the center, Cole Cabral, falling out of the draft?
Cole, yeah.
Yeah, we talked about him throughout the course of the summer and the fall. This was a guy that I feel like has the ability to stick in the NFL. Now, this is a team that needs offensive line help. Adding another guy like Cole, I think this is a guy that can come in and earn a spot on the 53 coming out of camp. So I keep an eye on Cole Cabral. I love his balance. He's got some versatility. Former tackle that moved inside to center, has some guard flexibility, so can play a number of different positions. We know how important versatility is for the back end of the depth chart along the offensive line. So this is a guy that can come in and kind of fill that role, wear that hat early on in his career until he develops into a starter. So keep an eye on Cole Cabral.
We really liked him over the summer, Fran. I remember watching him. But I promise you, one last guy, I promise you, Jalen Ramsey and Cam Akers both endorsed Levante Taylor. Number one corner in the country coming out of high school, 5-star, moved him to safety this past year. Again, that kind of dysfunctional Florida State team. Really, really intriguing athlete. I'm not sure if he's a nickel, a free safety. Reminded me a little bit of Ladarius Webb with the Baltimore Ravens, that undersized guy with a lot of speed. College career really didn't go to plan. But I promise you, if they ask for an opinion on them from Cam Akers and Jalen Ramsey, they both said, go get this kid.
Yeah, that's a great point. Actually, another name I thought about going there with my UDFA sleeper. All right, let's go to the AFC. We're going to the AFC West. The team that had the first selection for those teams, the LA Chargers. So we'll stay out west in LA. I'll tell you what, man. Like, they only had 6 picks. They made the most of these 6 picks. I really like what they did in this draft. Quarterback Justin Herbert, obviously 6th overall. They traded up back into the first round. They took Oklahoma linebacker Kenneth Murray. 4th round, they take UCLA running back Josh Kelly, a guy that I like. 5th round, they go with the Virginia wide receiver Joe Reed, a guy both of us liked. And then they go Alohi Gilman, the safety from Notre Dame, in the 6th round, and then Ohio State wide receiver KJ Hill in the 7th round. That's a good group, man.
Really good.
Let's talk about Justin Herbert, though. Why was he the pick here for this team?
Well, you need that quarterback of the future. So, whether it was going to be Tua or Justin or kind of whoever
we'll never know who they preferred.
Yeah, exactly. But, Justin was, the one sitting there in the pecking order for him, and they had Tyrod Taylor as the incumbent starter. You have Easton Stick's going to be the 3, and Justin Herbert, you kind of groom in that position. There's no immediate need for him to start with the veteran presence of Tyrod Taylor, but, his huge arm, big frame. And what I love most is the mix of strong arm and functional mobility, which I think is everything in today's NFL. You can't just be a dual threat runner. You can't just be a pocket passing statue anymore. You need that kind of mix of both. And I just think Justin Herbert has that. And he had absolutely no help the past 2 years at Oregon. Tons of drops all over that team. A bunch of really nice throws in the bucket here and there and drops. So the lack of production or lack of yardage or maybe the big plays lacked just a little bit in his college career. But he is a good-looking player here, Fran, and I think a lot of the questions were kind of just about his mental makeup and if he's that alpha dog that could really capture a room full of professional men. And I think that's what we're all waiting to see this summer.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be one of the interesting storylines to follow, just that quarterback position, that quarterback battle, because we know that Anthony Lynn likes Tyrod Taylor, feels comfortable with Tyrod Taylor. So do they decide we're going to stick with him early while Justin Herbert kind of sits and learns the way of the NFL, or do they give him the shot early on? It's going to be fun to watch. But I think when you look at that pairing, I think it does make a lot of sense with what they want to do offensively. And then Kenneth Murray, plug and play. He's going to be a 10-year impact player for that team. And I love when you look at how they're built in that second level with guys, the amount of speed and the matchup potential, up the middle of that defense with Derwin James and Kenneth Murray, just those two alone, not to mention what they've got along the defensive line. Really, really impressive group they've got out there on defense out in LA. All right, let's go day 3 standout. Who was your favorite pick of these day 3 picks? I think I know which way you're going here.
This one's easy. You know where I'm going. And it's not KJ Hill, who everybody knew was going to be a day 3 player because of his lack of speed. But I'm going with Joe Reed. And Fran, you put Joe Reed in last year's draft, the year before that. He's a day 2 player. This guy showed up at 6 foot, 224 at the combine. So he's built like a running back, ran 4.47. Has the speed, the explosiveness, and he does everything that all those other gadget and wildcat players do, whether, it's Henry Ruggs or, what Debo did at South Carolina, which seems like everybody is looking for. You can line them in the backfield, line up in the slot, good returner at 5 career kickoff return touchdowns, can catch the ball pretty well, really tough yards after catch or running between the tackles. I don't know what he is. I don't know if I call him a slot receiver, a running back, special teams player. He's a gadget player to me. He's a guy that you want in your skill player room and just find ways to get him the ball, whether it's jet sweeps, end arounds, quick games, RPOs. Just think of Debo last year with the Niners, and let's carve out a role with the Chargers.
Yeah, I went with KJ Hill. I just felt like he's got one of the best set of hands in this draft. Adding him in the 7th round, I thought was a really good get. A guy that could be a quarterback's best friend in the middle of the field, projects well to the slot. I like Joe Reed as well. I like a bunch of these picks here for the Chargers, but KJ Hill, I think, it was the guy that I feel has that ability to come in and stick with this roster. It's a pretty good receiver room overall.
Mike Williams and Keenan Allen and Joe Reed and KJ Hill. Those are some good, exciting players there to throw to.
No question. Let's get to some takeaways here from this squad. Look at Tom Telesco. He's been there for a long while with the Chargers. One thing that stands out, just looking over the course of their history, they don't shy away from guys who tested poorly at the combine. You look at guys like, Joey Bosa didn't quite light the turf on fire out in Indianapolis. DJ Fluker certainly was a guy that did not test well out in Indy. Mike Williams did not test well. He didn't test in Indy, but didn't test particularly well at his pro day. But they're also not afraid of guys with medical concerns. Mike Williams had the neck issue. Max Turk had a long list of injury issues at USC. They took him in the 2nd round. Derwin James had a little bit of a scary medical. Jason Verrett, obviously, that carried through to the NFL. And that's why I felt they could be a team that if Tua did fall to them at 6th overall, if Herbert wasn't there, would they have been afraid of taking Tua Tagovailoa? I don't know. Obviously, each of these injury situations is different, so you can't say, they're fine with taking all injured guys. But if things looked okay, I don't know that they would have bowed away from that. So certainly it's a couple takeaways there from looking at Tom Telesco and his history. Let's go to an undrafted sleeper here. Here's a guy that you're going to keep an eye on this summer.
Really quick, just kind of looking at the roster collectively, How often do we see a team that picked a quarterback in the top 6 that I feel pretty confident to say this is a contending team here, Fran?
Yeah.
This is a great roster, both sides of the ball, in the trenches, playmakers, if anything, getting healthier from last year. Derwin James coming back and all those types of guys. I'm just wondering what the sales pitch is in free agency, because you bring in Chris Harris, you bring in Linval Joseph, you bring in Brian Bulaga, veteran experience there. I think they're making a push here. Despite taking that quarterback at number 6, he may take over at some point in the season. But this is a team that I think is still pushing ahead here to make a run into the playoffs.
When we look at 2021, 2022, I feel like this is a team just to keep earmarked for, because we know what the template has been over the last few years, right? A lot of these teams, Eagles included, were able to win Super Bowls with their star quarterback on a rookie contract. And I think that the Chargers will certainly try and capitalize on that and say, all right, we've got our rookie quarterback. Let's get him in situation to succeed, but let's load up with free agents, vets that can come in and push this team ahead to win not just the West, but win the AFC.
The whole thing. Yeah, this whole AFC West is a really exciting division to talk about. But undrafted free agent for you here really quick. This guy's just got a fun story. Darius Bradwell out of Tulane, big boy running back. He's 6 foot 235. But the fun thing is, Fran, he showed up for the Tulane in 2016 as a quarterback and slowly moved his way to running back and then to fullback. But he was a spread option hybrid type of offense. So they didn't really use a true fullback. He was a big running back out in space. He's a lot like that kid at TCU, Seo Olo.
Hello. Yeah, right. Yep.
Yeah, right. But just a fun player that could be that kind of bell cow, thunder and lightning for maybe Austin Eckler and Josh Kelly and some of those guys in front of him.
I went with the Northwestern kid, Joe Gaziano, the defensive lineman. This is a defensive line that, they like moving guys around along the defensive line to, try and win some matchups. I think Gaziano is a guy that not only can win off the edge, but I think you can slide him inside and try and create some matchups. He's the kind of try-hard player that I think kind of caters to Gus Bradley and the kind of players that he looks for. So just keep an eye on Gaziano. He's a guy that I studied that I kind of like. He's got limitations, obviously. That's why he wasn't drafted. But I liked his play personality for sure. Let's get to the Las Vegas Raiders here. I mentioned earlier they go Henry Ruggs, 12th overall in the 1st round. Another 1st-round pick in the top 20. They take corner Damon Arnett, from Ohio State. A trio of third-round picks here with Lynn Bowden Jr., the wide receiver who played quarterback for Kentucky, Brian Edwards, the wide receiver from South Carolina, and then Clemson linebacker Tanner Muse. Just two day 3 picks, and they both came in the 4th round. John Simpson, the guard from Clemson, and then Louisiana Tech cornerback Amik Robertson. So let's get to the first round, Ben. Why were these guys the pick here?
Well, Henry Ruggs obviously is track speed, playmaking speed, not only taking the top off vertically, but horizontally as well, and just making defenses cover every blade of grass on the field. That's the name of the game. He's going to get the ball in his hands in easy ways, RPOs, quick game, screen, return ability. And then in addition, his blocking excellent, his special teams, his gunning. He's a guy you want on your team and in your locker room. He's not just a playmaking diva receiver that wants touchdowns. He's a teammate. He's a football player. He's a locker room guy, does a lot of the dirty work and checks a lot of the boxes as far as off the field and just being a leader and a captain. And then moving to Damon Arnett, that's kind of when the draft kind of ebbs and flows really started to take some turns there. I think that was the first surprising pick, middle 1st round. Seems to be the Raiders' way now, kind of ruffling some feathers in the draft, surprising some people, taking Clean Farrell early last year. Mike Mayock holding cards close to his chest there. But Damon Arnett's played a lot of good football for a really good football team in Ohio State. He's been on the field a ton. He's played outside corner, played some time in the nickel, had some issues here and there, had some falling out of love with Urban Meyer at times. He was even given that brutal number 46 number in the spring, which is given to guys not giving a full 4 to 6 seconds of effort. And he was kind of put on notice. He was given his number 3 back before the season. But he's a guy that's played a lot of good football and was kind of just over, just a little underhyped with the way Jeffrey Okudah and Sean Wade and some of those other guys that happens at schools like Ohio State. You get some young guys in there, some exciting young blood, and suddenly you forget about that senior that's been there for 3 years. And I think that was kind of the Damon Arnett story, in my opinion.
I think when you look at both these guys, they both, and I've used this word, I use it all the time because it's something that I just watch for. They both, Henry Ruggs and Damon Arnett, have an edge. They both have that competitive style, and I think that's a hallmark of something that they're trying to build. That's a John Gruden thing. That's a Mike Mayock thing. And I think when you look at the way that they're trying to build their team, and I guess went over the top thing. They want tough, competitive, blue collar, all alpha dog type of personalities. That's what they want. And I had a scout from another team talk to me about Henry Ruggs and said, like, this is a guy that's going to step in and be the guy in the room, in the wide receiver room. Like Damon Arnett has that kind of personality. Like he's got that throwback, I'm the best guy out here kind of person. Like that's what they want. And so I think when you look at Ruggs and Arnett, they both kind of fit. You look back at Mike Mayock's draft last year with the Raiders, his first draft. He's scouting off his own sheet. He's scouting with his eyes, not his ears. He's not worried about how other people had players valued, which is, there's nothing wrong with approaching it that way. So to me, both picks, I think when you look at the way that they build their team, make a lot of sense. Let's get here to day 3 standouts. A few different third round picks, but only 2 day 3 picks. Who was the one that stood out to you?
Well, it seems like we're kind of changing the page here on the back end of this defense. It's open season here, Fran. We got Trayvon Mullen, we got Jonathan Abram, and then it's open season for competition. We brought in Prince Amukamara, brought in Demarius Randall. We got LaMarcus Joyner back there, bringing Damon Arnett in the first round, and then little old Amik Robertson at a La Tech. And you think, La Tech, who is this kid? He's actually an All-American at La Tech, Fran, and a PFF All-American, productive player, 14 career interceptions, 34 PBUs, absolute ball hawk, tons of ball production, tons of experience. His knocks are he played at La Tech and he's 5'9", 180 pounds. But he's fast, he's feisty, he's physical. He reminds me a lot of Pac-Man Jones. The attitude, the size, the playmaking ability. And then you look at, 5'9", 180. Don't think that can't survive in the NFL. Because Captain Munnerlin's played for 12 years in the NFL in that nickel position. Buster Skrine is that size, a really nice nickel player. Kenny Moore is playing good ball with the Colts. Mike Hilton at Ole Miss.
Even Jimmy Moreland last year.
No question at James Madison. Yeah, that's a great comparison. You could be undersized if you have a little bit of edge to you, a little bit of competitiveness, and you show you have some ball skills, I'm not willing to say at 5'9", 180, he's a default nickel. He showed me enough on the outside, punching some Texas receivers right in the face who are 6'5", not backing down. I really like this kid, Fran.
You took all the words out of my mouth for Amik Robertson. I don't think I have anything to add there. In terms of over-the-top takeaways, I talked about the kind of personality that they're looking for. When you look at their drafts, too, over the last 2 years, they're not prioritizing size. They're not prioritizing athleticism and athletic testing and the combine. They're not looking for the long speed, the guys that light up the track. You think back to the Raiders, now Davis, and they want the fastest guy, and that's how they're setting their board. That's not what they've looked like. But, when you look at the toughness aspect, that's what they want. They're also not afraid of guys that didn't put up big numbers. You look at Henry Ruggs. You look at Josh Jacobs, Jonathan Abram, Trayvon Mullen, Isaiah Johnson. They were guys that when you look at the stat sheet for them over the course of their college careers, did not put up big numbers, but they had those personality traits and the physical traits, the physical toughness that they're looking for. The other big one, too, and people joke about this, but there's something to it. They've taken 5 guys from Clemson in 2 years. They've traded up. They've traded up for 2 different guys from Clemson in 2 years. So it's clearly Mike Mayock. Obviously, there's something he likes down there in the water down at Clemson and what Dabo's cooking down there. But I think it's certainly something to keep an eye on here moving forward for that team. Give us an undrafted sleeper. Here's a name that really caught your eye for the Raiders.
Well, Fran, it's not just Clemson. You just got to put on that 2018 championship game, right. Alabama-Clemson, and then suddenly you'll see, we got Josh Jacobs now, and Hunter Renfrow, Clelin Ferrell, Trayvon Mullen. Picking Alabama players and Clemson players seems to be a pretty safe bet these days. So I think Mayock and Gruden are onto it. Yeah, but undrafted, 2 guys that kind of intrigued me. Kid that I was expecting to have a better year, massive right tackle, Kamal Seymour at Rutgers. Showed some good stuff at guard in the NFLPA Bowl, but he's 6'6", 325, massive. But the kid I really want to talk about is this corner, Madre Harper from Southern Illinois. Okay. Played some ball there with Jeremy Chin, who was a high draft pick. But he was an Oklahoma State transfer. And he was a high recruit, had to transfer, went to Southern Illinois, ran 4.41 this past offseason, has the speed, has the kind of acumen and the playmaking ability, the athleticism, just a really intriguing player. And I think that's what you do with undrafted players.
No, it's a great point. Let's get to the Denver Broncos here and kind of run through their picks really fast. Here we got first round, 15th overall, wide receiver Jerry Jeudy out of Alabama. Second round, wide receiver KJ Hamler, wide receiver out of Penn State. A couple of third-round picks here. Michael Ojemudia, the corner from Iowa, a converted linebacker who played linebacker in high school and made the move to corner with the Hawkeyes. Another third-round pick, Lloyd Cushenberry, the center from LSU. Another third-round pick, McTelvin Agim, the defensive lineman from Arkansas. And then we go to day 3, Albert Okwuegbunam, the tight end from Missouri, rejoins Drew Lock. Justin Sternad, the linebacker from Wake Forest in the 5th round. Natani Muti, the guard from Fresno State in the 6th round. And then a couple of 7th-round picks, wide receiver Tyree Cleveland from Florida and Derek Tuska, the pass rusher from North Dakota State. So let's get to the first-round pick, Jerry Jeudy. Why was he the pick here?
Well, the best pure route runner in this class, the explosive speed, the playmaking ability with the ball in his hands, can win pretty much every level of the defense, the quick game, the route running in the second level. He could take the top off with not only vertical speed, but nuanced route running and double moves and knowing how to stack receivers. But Fran, just taking a step back here, we just need to take a snapshot of what this 2020 Broncos team is looking like with young second-year Drew Lock, mixing in with free agent Melvin Gordon, and then adding to what they already had in the athletic Noah Fant and Cortland Sutton, who I was just massively impressed with his rapport this past year with Drew Lock. But adding Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler, and then a 4-4 tight end in Albert O, and then a day 3 4-4 guy in Tyree Cleveland. Tons of speed all over this team. Aside from the Philadelphia Eagles, it's really one of the better skill player drafts and just addressing the need for speed and needing playmakers around your young quarterback. I think the Eagles, the Broncos really took advantage of this 2020 group.
So that I'm big on trying to research the connections and who knows who and and I feel because it's such a big part of not just draft but the free agency as well. And to me, it's
connect
not
the dots
about,
here. What do you got?
Yeah, connecting dots. It's not about oh, well, they know that he knows this coach, and so he's going to make the pick. It's that they're going to get those extra nuggets, those relationships. If some scouts can go in and they're going to hear from the strength coach, they're going to hear from the position coaches, the academic guys, and all that. But when you have a relationship with a coach, you worked with this guy, you know him well, they might be more willing to say, just give you an honest assessment, and that could be both positive and negative. You're going to get the very best information possible. So when you see, oh, well, who's the wide receiver coach for the Denver Broncos? And that's Zach Asiani, and he's only been in the NFL for a couple of years. Where was he before that? Oh, he was University of Tennessee, and he was the wide receiver coach and like the pass game coordinator or recruiting coordinator, and like, all right, well, who's the head coach at Tennessee? And it was like, oh, it was Butch Jones. Where's Butch Jones now? Well, after he got fired at Tennessee, he's been an offensive analyst with the University of Alabama for the last 2 years. So, you look at Zach Asiani, it's like, all right, well, he gets Butch Jones on the phone. Butch Jones pounds the table. He's like, hey, like, I don't care who else you get. You got to get Jerry Jeudy because he does X, Y, Z. You're going to love him. I worked with you for 4 years. Like, he does this, and this. So, to me, like, those kinds of things play a big part. And, again, it's not about, like, connecting the dots and saying, yep, that's going to be the pick, but knowing that they're going to get better information more often than not. They're going to get better information than anybody else. And every team has those relationships with different schools and with different people in the business.
Right.
It could be, from the front office side or the coaching side. It's about finding those connections and saying, all right, well, what is the reason behind this? But to me, like, I look at the Asiani connection there as something to keep an eye on.
But Fran, really quick with that, also not just to say every coach is going to promote their players. I thought it was really interesting in the Art of Coaching documentary with Belichick and Saban. Yeah. They were just talking about how Belichick will always call Saban and ask for his opinion. And Saban just kind of took a step back and said, there's some coaches that, like, never call me. And then they take so-and-so player, and he's like, why would you take him? And then we talk later, like, you shouldn't have taken him. And he's like, well, how was I supposed to know? And Saban just said, all you had to do is call me. I would have told you.
Yep.
And I think sometimes the picture and the narrative is these coaches are just going to try to do whatever they can to get these players to the next level, no matter how blind or, lying they need to be. They're going to be honest with these NFL coaches. And some of them that they're friends with, they may be brutally honest. And I think hearing not only the pros, but the cons as well of these players and maybe some guys to stay away from is really part of the whole picture.
Yeah, to me, it's such an important. I've done full podcasts on this topic, both on this podcast and on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast about this specific topic. To me, it's just one of the more fascinating parts that people don't necessarily talk about when it comes to player acquisition and team building. Let's go to a day 3 sleeper here. Who's somebody that you like that they were able to acquire on the 3rd day of the draft?
Well, teased it already. I'm just going to kind of group these guys together, but grabbing Florida receiver Tyree Cleveland is a 4.4 player, and big Albert O, who surprised us all running 4.4 at that size. Who, is probably looking at 2018, who's going to be the tight end number 1 in 2019, and kind of took a step back once Drew Lock left. And Tyree Cleveland dealt with some quarterback issues there at Florida. Felipe Franks moving to Kyle Trask and Del Rio, not to mention mixed in with a lot of other receivers there, a couple transfers coming in. So if you're one of those scouts that put a lot of emphasis on production share, Tyree Cleveland's not going to be your guy. But he was a high recruit, tons of athleticism, has the 4.4 speed. And just adding all those players, 4.4 Jerry Jeudy, 4.3 Hamler, 4.4 Albert O, 4.4 Tyree Cleveland. I mean, that's what you want to do to keep up with this track meet in the AFC West.
To me, like, I'm going to go to their final pick, Derek Tuska, the pass rusher from North Dakota State. He's going to make this team. I really feel like this is a guy I feel can come in and be a really nice backup defensive end coming off the bench. I really like that selection for them there in the 7th round. Let's go over the top here. One big thing, I mentioned Derek Tuska. He's just the second, number 2, the second FCS player ever drafted by John Elway in 8 drafts, like a really, really low number. So you talk about guys that, they prioritize the bigger schools. They'll dive into the group of 5 schools, but man, they'd never take guys from the lower ranks. The only other guy they did was that corner from Lamar. Was it Brendan Langley? They took him from the FCS. He was a transfer from Georgia, so he was a big school kid that just transferred down. Tuska has been in the FCS throughout the course of his career. The other big thing, look, they do not care about age as much. They will honestly, they will trend a little bit older, but they prioritize speed and athleticism. They just don't take guys that flunk the combine or flunk the pro day. They want guys that can run. Even though they're not taking all blazers, they're not going straight Al Davis, but they're not taking guys that don't run. They're not taking guys that can't move. So that's something to keep an eye on. And overall, just kind of looking at their guys over the course of the 8 years there with John Elway, a little bit more developmental in nature. Like they put a lot of faith in their coaches to get the most out of the guys that they bring in the draft. So that's some of my takeaways there from the Denver Broncos. Undrafted sleeper, I'll go first here. You talk about speed. They did it again in undrafted free agency. They went and they got the Western Michigan running back Levante Bellamy. Is a 4.3 kid. Some people think he could go 4.2. But this is a guy who's a blazer. That speed matches. In person, I thought he ran well down at the Shrine Bowl in St. Pete. This is a guy who moves really well, can impact the game as a pass catcher as well. So Bellamy, certainly a name to keep an eye on here.
Good. I knew you were going to take him, so I'm going to go to my buddy Asanj Bassi, the defensive back corner from Wake Forest. Undersized, didn't run. He did run particularly well. He ran 4.46, but the scheme didn't do him any favors. A lot of that off-man quarter stuff where he's put on islands. He's a little undersized, didn't tackle particularly well. Occasionally got ran past by bigger receivers, but he's got great ball skills, 5 picks, 45 PBUs in his career, tons of on-field experience, team captain. Watching a clip here of him intercepting Lamar Jackson a couple years ago. He's a really interesting player. I don't know if he's going to make the team, but he's an experienced player with good speed, good ball skills. Remind me a little bit of DJ Reed coming out of Kansas State a couple years ago that we both liked, who I think carved out a nice role with the San Francisco 49ers. But similar type of undersized corner that probably projects to be a nickel.
All right, let's go to our final team here. The Kansas City Chiefs, the Super Bowl champs. They picked 32nd overall. They took LSU running back Clyde Edwards-Helaire. We're going to I'll come back to it. We're going to talk about it a little bit. Second round, they take the linebacker Willie Gay Jr. out of Mississippi State. Round 3, they take TCU tackle Lucas Niang. And then 3 day 3 picks. L'Jarius Sneed, the safety converted corner from La Tech. Mike Dana, the defensive lineman from Michigan, who transferred from Central Michigan. And then 7th round, they took the corner Bo Pete Keys from Tulane. Let's go to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Look, you had been pounding the table about Clyde Edwards-Helaire since the fall. Brian Westbrook. So they go to the post-draft press conference. You talk to, or you get to hear from Andy Reid. You get to hear, from that front office. And they said, what do they say? They said, Andy Reid. They're talking about comparing Clyde Edwards-Helaire to Brian Westbrook, and he's like, yeah, he's better. And so to me, like you were the first person I thought of when I heard that. Not a lot of mystery as to why Clyde Edwards-Helaire was the selection and why he fits in that offense.
Fran, he had so many Mark Ingram comps for some reason throughout the season. It was
the body type.
Yeah, the body type, maybe the number, or they're both number 22 there, a little squatty, but I just saw a lot more shiftiness in his routes, those angle routes. I did not see that really from Mark Ingram in his college career at Alabama or even much with the pros. I know he did have an angle route this past year on Monday night against the Rams, Mark. I used that during your combine breakdown. But anyways, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, yes, doing everything that Brian Westbrook can do and Andy Reid's offense, contributing in the pass game and the run game. Really prolific runner, not only between the tackles and getting hidden and small, but can get outside with the speed, can create for himself. Surprisingly tough, considering his size, great contact balance. His leg drive, we could put together a reel of like an hour of just watching his impressive leg drive at the end of runs. And this is not a big running back. Everything he's doing, he plays much bigger than his size would suggest. And pairing him with the Andy Reid, just thinking about Brian Westbrook, and really just thinking that this Chiefs team didn't really have a prolific, dual threat back coming out of the backfield last year. Yeah, a little LaShawn McCoy, Damian Williams, Darwin Thompson is an interesting player out of Utah State. But Clyde Edwards-Helaire could end up being a Christian McCaffrey type player for this offense with looking at a 80, 90, 100 target season.
I've compared 2 players to Brian Westbrook since, I've started doing the player, the draft evaluations and stuff. McCaffrey was the other one. And to me, I feel like Edwards-Helaire could be an absolute.
The only reason I don't think he's going to dominate anything with a high volume like Christian McCaffrey has is because, number one, Andy Reid won't allow that. He wasn't going to spread the ball around. And number two, he has people that he needs to spread the ball around to.
Right.
He has Tyreek Hill. He has McCole Hardman. He has Sammy Watkins, Travis Kelce. You have this guy, Patrick Mahomes, as well. Why load any of those guys up with a high volume? Spread it out. Make yourself dangerous in a week-to-week, drive-to-drive, down-to-down basis where you don't know where they're going to attack you. And I'd be pretty remiss to not see this Chiefs team making another strong run this year.
Yeah, I would think so. Let's go to day 3. Only a couple picks here on the third day of the draft. By the way, I love the Lucas Niang pick in the third round. We talked about him a lot.
Oh, yeah.
First-round talent that we felt was going to fall to day 2. Getting him in the third round was a steal for the Chiefs. But my favorite day 3 pick, I'm going to go with L'Jarius Sneed in the 4th round. This is a guy that I actually watched right before the Combine. And you could see that he's got that speed. He's got juice, man. And he's got some length. I think he could be a kind of a tight end matchup guy. The way that they play defense in that secondary, a lot of matchup-based football. I think Sneed certainly has that ability to be, a quote-unquote positionless kind of player because of his body type and his skill set, his athleticism. I kind of like that fit there in the 4th round.
Yeah, I was kind of intrigued with Mike Dana. I was expecting a bigger year coming to Don Brown's real interesting rush scheme, being the transfer from Central Michigan, but was never able to really carve out a role. He's a little bit undersized. I couldn't figure out if he was going to be a stand-up guy or an edge, a true defensive end with his hand in the ground. Didn't really have the production there at Michigan. Josh Uche really stole a lot of that. But the Bo Keys kid out of Tulane is a really interesting corner. Big, physical kid. Actually reminds me a lot of Rashad Breeland, who they already have. So that'd be an interesting type of grooming process. My comparison for Bo Pete is Josh Jackson coming out of Iowa a couple years ago. Big, physical, maybe doesn't have the long speed, but has the ball skills, the size, and the physicality to beat you up and make up for that.
Yeah, it's a really good point.
And not to mention the free agency. We could talk about the Chiefs' free agent picture for an hour because they didn't do anything outside the building. They said, we won the Super Bowl. We don't have a whole lot of draft picks. Let's bring back our guys. Let's get DeMarcus Robinson back. Let's get Chad Henne back. Let's get Rashad Breeland back. Do not let Chris Jones hit the open market. We franchised him. And that's really it. And it's kind of funny to look at this picture of the Kansas City Chiefs, and not a whole lot is different coming into 2020.
Oh, it's a good point. Over the top takeaways, speed. I mean, you look at Clyde Edwards-Helaire, certainly he's more athletic than fast. But I think when you look at Willie Gay Jr., you look at L'Jarius Sneed, they're just getting faster on both sides of the football. It's the name of the game out there in Kansas City. And then the other one, look, they're not afraid of guys, and this is an Andy Reid thing. This goes back to when he was here in Philly. They're not afraid of guys that have had missteps off the field as long as the character checks out. He's a guy that believes in second chances. And, you look at Willie Gay Jr., what did he start? He started 6 games in his college career because of the issues that he had from an academic standpoint. But all the reports were in the media that, hey, like, this is a good kid. He's a hard worker. He's just, the school wasn't for him. So I think when you look at guys like that, he's always going to kind of lean, that way. And he's added guys since he's been in Kansas City that have kind of fit that mold. But that's certainly one of the takeaways from the Chiefs. Undrafted free agent sleeper. I'm going to go Lavert Hill, man. The corner from Michigan, I thought was a draftable player. I think he's got starting traits in a press man scheme. He just doesn't run all that well. But man, plays the ball, really smart player, instinctive player. I like Lavert Hill.
Fran, nobody has played more press man snaps in their college career in this 2020 draft than Lavert Hill. They're playing press man in Don Brown's scheme coming off the bus. And if you want a guy to play press man for you, Lavert Hill has the experience. He's even played some nickel for them. Really good player. I thought he was draftable as well, in my opinion. Oddly, there's a lot of Michigan players on this team. Obviously, they have Frank Clark, Taco Charlton's out there. They even have Shea Patterson over with the undrafted free agents, Chad Henne. We'll stay in the Big Ten. We'll stay in Michigan. Michigan State, interesting receiver in Cody White. And I thought he might have squeezed into the 7th round there. Didn't really have the production, but high recruit, Michigan Mr. Football, is a U.S. Army All-American. His dad is actually Sheldon White. Spent a lot of time as the executive director of player personnel with the Lions, played DB in the league for a while, but really intriguing athlete who I compared to a Miles Austin. That's really all I have for you there. But just think of what Miles Austin was for those early years with the Cowboys. Athletic, good route running, good size, not massive, but a really good route runner, explosive, good hands. I think he might surprise some people in the summer here.
No, that's certainly a good name to bring up. Well, Ben, we are 3/4 of the way through our divisional recaps, man. Last one we're going to do is next week. We're going to do the AFC and NFC South. Thanks again for joining us here on the Draft Buzz segment of Journey Draft Podcast, driven by AAA. We'll talk to you again next week. Great stuff there from Ben. Hope you guys enjoyed today's podcast. We've got another great one next week. Ben and I are going to wrap up the AFC and NFC South, so we'll cover those 8 teams, and that'll wrap up all 32 teams. Kind of hard to believe. We're kind of putting the 2020 NFL Draft to bed next week, and we'll start with our look ahead to 2021 as well. We've got another great guest lined up for next week's podcast as well, so make sure you tune in next time here on the Journey to the Draft Podcast, driven by AAA.